You're listening to the Teach Better Talk podcast featuring expert educators eager to share progressive tactics to reach more students. Teach Better Talk is created by teachers and fueled by passion. Let's get started.
Hey everyone, welcome to episode 55 of Teach Better Talk. I'm Ray Hewart, and as always, I am with the thought-provoking Jeff Gargis. How you doing, Jeff?
I'm feeling very thought-provoking.
I think that was a nice compliment.
I thought it was, yeah. So we got that from our guest tonight, Elisabeth Bostwick. I thought it was pretty cool, that she recommended that word for you.
I have to say, for you, first of all, it was very thought-provoking. She thought you were thought-provoking, and I do agree with that because it was our interaction that we had just a few years ago on Twitter that changed my life, and there was definitely a lot of thought-provoking conversations that came from our interactions.
That's a good spin on that. Yeah, thought-provoking, tricky. What's the word I'm looking for? I was trying to think of a word of
pain in the butt. That's what I was thinking.
Tricking you into working with us, but no. So before we get into, because it was a great episode, before we get in there, I wanted to bring up, and this is actually sort of tied because we sort of touched on this, but so Elisabeth is an instructional coach, and so I was talking. Where was I? I can't remember where I was at. I was at something recently, like a social function. And
it's a great story so far.
Yeah, I thought you'd like so. And I was talking. It's a guy that I run into every now and then, and he always asks about how business is going, how things are going, and he doesn't really understand the world we're in, so he's always really interested to talk to me about it because I think he likes to learn things. And I'm not joking. So the position of instructional coaches came up in the conversation. I said it somewhere, and he's like, "What is that?" And so I'm gonna flip it on you. Like, when you think instructional coach, what comes to mind for you?
So an instructional coach, first we can note that it's almost a luxury to have in a building. I wish that I saw more districts that had coaches, whether they be, other coaches, but instructional coaches would be great. And I think they are, if I was to define it, leaders in the building that have a role in obviously not just helping their colleagues, but they have a leadership role to facilitate more deep conversations on best practice components of instruction. Would you agree?
I agree with that a bit. Yeah, their role is that support piece of being there for not just.
Yeah, they don't have their own classroom.
Yeah, they're all over. They're
in everyone's classroom.
Yeah, they're help supporting the students. They're help supporting the admin team, and they're help supporting their colleagues, the teachers that are in the classrooms and doing what they can. And we talk about that, and I think there's a lot of challenges that come in that role. I think
sure.
We've talked before, you and I. We've had conversations about that role, and more specifically in sort of like the tech integration coach role, which I wanted to mention. I wanted to mention because I thought you did an awesome job breaking that down in the course that we did just a little while ago. And I think so much of that course, even though it was kind of focused on the IT piece, transfers over to any sort of coaching or support role. Do you agree with that? Am I off base?
No, you're totally on base. It's funny because when we originally designed that course, it was meant to be a workshop that we were doing for a tech conference. And after the tech conference, we had so many people asking us to make an online course because the people that they felt like they wanted to connect with this content may not have been at the conference. So we did the course with that tech mindset. And it's funny that now that we've stepped away from that, now that it's kind of finished and out in the, Teach Better Academy, it's almost unfortunate that we put that tech component in the title because it really is just a leadership building relationships with people that you're working with type of course. The focus has very little to do with technology and more to do with, okay, if you're in a position where you're helping anybody, whether you're officially in that role and you don't have your own classroom, or you're just helping somebody colleague to colleague, or you're in administration and you're helping a teacher, it's all about that relationship piece and how to not only build that, but sustain it. And so that lend itself really well to what Elisabeth talked about in this episode, because she focused a lot on relationships, which is an integral part of being a successful coach, is you have to have a relationship before you can really be a partner in that growth component.
I agree
of the
100%.
classroom.
Yeah, I agree 100%. And the course you did is amazing for that. I think does a great job breaking it down. And I think this episode, Elisabeth offers so much for anyone who's in any type of role like that to take with them and learn from. And so speaking of the episode, let's talk about it for a second. So great episode. Elisabeth Bostwick. She's we've been connecting to her on social for a long time, but she's amazing. 14 plus years in the classroom. Now she's, like we said, an instructional coach. She's also the author of Take the Leap, Ignite Culture, a Culture of Innovation. She's also one of the co-authors of Education Right Now, Volume 2, Top Strategies for Improving Relationships and Culture, which we learned tonight. We learned a really cool thing about how they wrote that book in the episode that she's going to share, which I thought was awesome. And a little terrifying if you ask me, but amazing.
I agree.
It was really cool. So some of I really loved, and you've touched on a little bit, like that she talked a lot about the relationship piece. When we mentioned culture, she really talked a lot about fostering that culture, which I thought was awesome, because just in episode 53 with Chris McGraw, he talks a lot about the culture too, and that is obviously at your school. So we touched on it a little bit there, and there was something she said that I wrote down. I don't know. I'm sure you caught it, and I really love that she said learning is more important than teaching content.
Right.
And I just really latched onto that. I don't know why. Like, I just love that, like, focusing on actual learning versus that content delivery. And she shares a little bit of how she got there in her story of her failure.
You know, one of the episodes, if you want to go way back, I know you referenced 53 with Chris McGraw, but also you go back to 19 with Jimmy Cassis. I mean, he's the culture guy, right?
Yeah.
You're talking about educators that are thriving on building not just classroom culture, but building culture.
Yeah, he talks about collecting the dots before you connect them, right?
Oh, yeah.
And it was such an awesome thing. So yeah, absolutely love it. Was there anything that stuck out from this episode that Elisabeth said or we talked about that's just in your head right now?
You know, I had a bunch of stuff I wrote down for Elisabeth. I think that she shared so much insight, not only in her obviously focus on relationships and culture, but just in her experience in the classroom. I mean, we've noted it 14 times and we said it again, but she's got 14 years in the classroom and, you know, obviously built those pieces. I can't put my finger on, I had one thing, but I just feel like if you are listening right now, we got to get into the episode. There's so many amazing details. So as you're taking notes, wherever you're listening today, you should share them out via Twitter or Instagram, because I'd love to see what you pulled away from this episode.
Absolutely. And with that, let's get into episode 55 with Elisabeth Bostwick. All right. So we are here talking to Elisabeth Bostwick. And Elisabeth, we really appreciate you taking some time out of your busy schedule and chatting with us, hanging out with us, sharing some stories with us tonight. But before we do anything, how are you feeling?
I am feeling great and really honored to be here with both of you.
Well, Elisabeth, we're going to have so much fun, but I do want to begin for all of our listeners talking about you. I know that Jeff provided a great introduction, but how do you describe yourself when someone asks you what you do?
Before I go into describing myself, I want to provide a little bit of background information to give context to this. To begin with, my most important role and how I would describe myself is that I'm a mom, I'm a wife, and caring for my family is my number one top priority. And I share this because my boys are a major reason for why I'm so passionate about the topics in which I speak and write on, and why I strive to transform learning experiences in the classroom. Through their lens, I've gained a unique perspective into what it means to really learn and what kids enjoy about the learning process. And boy, is my kids, they're very honest, and I appreciate that. I appreciate seeing what goes well and what they struggle with. So as you both know too, learning isn't about compliantly memorizing facts and information or completing worksheets. And not to say that all worksheets necessarily are evil or bad, because sometimes they're very useful too. But it's really a journey that can be challenging yet rewarding. And we need to be involving students in goal setting, leveraging their strengths, and getting to know their interests to create authentic learning opportunities. And I think in school, we often lose sight of that. And we lose a lot of kids because, traditionally speaking, our focus is often on content. And too many students fall through the cracks, and not necessarily academically, because some, as you know, still perform well, but rather I sometimes wonder how many students could become even more if we reimagined school and learning and placed a greater emphasis on social emotional learning, developing competencies and skills, and worked more closely with stakeholders. So If I were to really describe myself and what I do professionally, it's supporting and inspiring educators to grasp that without the foundation of relationships, infusing opportunities for authentic learning experiences, and leveraging the strengths and interests of individuals will never quite help students reach their full potential. And I'm someone who can be relied on to develop trusting relationships, belief in others, and provide support to help both teachers and students excel. So, all in all, I see myself as somebody who serves as a force of influence, who is seeking to transform learning experiences for students, making education better for all involved, including students, staff, families, and stakeholders. And ultimately, I want our sons to know that I did everything possible to support schools to prepare students for their future as our world is rapidly changing. And, it's really not just about my kids. I've talked to so many of my friends who are parents and even my students' families, and every single one of us has something in common. And that's that we all desire for our kids to want to go to school and stay curious. We want our children to be embraced for who they are as individuals and empowered in their learning, developing greater independence.
Wow. I love so much of everything you just said. I love the fact that you touch on how your kids and your family and your role as a mom and wife is number one. It's such an important piece of that, but it's not just your kids, it's about everyone's
Right.
kids, and want to do so much for some more. And I think that's such a cool thing. And that's like one of I think the most amazing things about teachers is that it's this desire and this passion for not just your kids, but all these everyone else's kids, and you do so much for other people's children, and that's amazing. As a parent who has children in school, like, that's just a really cool feeling to always have. I love that you used the word inspiring. You talked about taking kids to their full potential, and I love that you said you're a force of influence for transforming education and helping teachers out. I love it. It's awesome. So you've got a really cool role there. You're also an author of an awesome book, Take the Leap. You got,
Thank you.
I think I believe, if I'm correct, you have more than 14 years experience, right? 14 plus,
Yes.
right?
Yes, I do have classroom experience, and now as an instructional coach.
And how long have you been in the instructional coach position?
Oh, gosh, only for a short amount of time now, just a couple of months.
But 14 years in the classroom is a lot of experience.
Yep.
And now so that's awesome. Now you're shifting a new role. So between that, there's a new shift. There's an author writing a book. All these different things are going on. You speak. You travel around and stuff. So lots of experience there. I want to dive into. We talk a lot about failure here, and my team will tell you that I talk about it all the time, and that I love how much I've failed. Not that I loved it when it happened, but because I've learned so much from it. So can you take us to a time that you failed, that you've had a failure in your life? Tell us what happened. Why was it a failure for you? How did you overcome it? And then what did you learn from that experience?
Yeah, well, let me share first of all that when I entered the field of education, my initial focus was on relationships and reaching kids to foster a genuine joy of learning. And everything I did, from working as an intern at our local social services department to support both biological and foster families and the children in foster care, and even working summer camps and my student teaching, everything was focused on relationships. And so with all of my education experiences and being well aware that learning was more important than teaching content, like actual learning. But regardless of this and all that I learned, I'm going to be honest here that I did something that today kind of shames me. So let me tell you, truth be told, first of all, I never even wanted to go into education because there were so many aspects of school that I didn't enjoy as a child. And I was certainly fortunate to have some stellar educators who had an extremely positive influence on me, but school didn't seem to spark passion or excitement within me. However, I went into education to be a difference maker, just like both of you did too. And I wanted to be the difference maker that I would have wanted as a child. But unfortunately, what I went into education to do and then what I actually did shifted unexpectedly once I was in my first year of teaching. And I don't know if you two, do you remember your first year of teaching?
Oh my gosh, yes.
Right? It's overwhelming. So in my first year of teaching, you see, I had a greater emphasis on compliance-based learning. And even though that's not what I started out to do, and today I'm kind of embarrassed to share that, but I do share this because I want listeners to understand that just because of the accolades that I have, it doesn't mean that I haven't made mistakes. So early on, I did what many teachers did. I assigned homework every single night. And sometimes if we couldn't finish something in class, that too also became homework. And I was teaching fourth grade at the time, and the demands to ensure we covered the content and prepared students for the state assessments was palpable. So because of that, I felt like the more work I pushed, the better prepared students would be. And, I think what's most important here is that we always share our failures, share our mistakes, because then we can learn from them. You see, I'll forever be a teacher at heart, and my passion is connecting with and supporting fellow educators to be their very best. So that's why I do share. But you see, back then, early in my career, my head was so wrapped up in the desire for students to do well and demonstrate growth, because in my mind, it was a reflection of my teaching. And on top of that, it was common for teachers at our school to send home even the test prep materials during the weekends or long breaks. And let's be honest, we all know that doing so has zero positive effect on learning. In fact, this practice is exactly what makes kids hate school and detest the process of learning, done in that way at least. So at that time, all I could see were the needs in our classroom, yet I was looking at the wrong needs. And without a doubt, content is important, but the approach was actually counterproductive to my goal. And I was completely failing at what I thought I was working towards. But it's that very failure that allowed me to have the opportunity to learn, reflect, and retool. And you see, a failure is only a complete failure if you stop and don't improve and don't reflect to improve on it. But if we can persevere through failure and ultimately grow, it's not a complete failure,
So, if you take it and learn from it, it's no longer a failure. It becomes a learning opportunity.
And I want to share with you how that came to be. And I'm going to paint the picture of you for when I realized I was experiencing failure. Our son, Julian, was born in August of 2004. It was just after my first year of teaching. And so I was off on maternity leave for 3 months that fall. And upon my return, my perspective on teaching was already shifting. I was completely immersed in watching Julian learn little things in life, such as reaching up to touch an object or looking in awe as the wind moved the leaves on the trees. He was intensely curious about the world around him. And on top of that, I felt so much love that I thought my heart was going to burst. And becoming a mom just grounded me in what mattered most. So after my leave, when I returned back to my fourth grade placement, mornings were hard as I had to leave my son. He'd cry, and as I comforted him in the doorway at our home daycare provider, what I was struck with was how she was hustling around trying to make sure that all three of her own children made it out to the bus. Well, she also transitioned little ones in the door. And the reality of home life hit me. I realized with the love I had for my son and all the curiosity I saw within him, I was putting it together with what I was doing in the classroom was squashing that, even though I was not working with daycare age children. And it really made me step back and start thinking about family life and the importance of that. And when I was dropping him off at the daycare, one of her children of the daycare provider was whining that the child didn't want to go to school, and another was asking where his signed planner was. And anybody can argue that they could have been more organized the night before. But the reality is that they were probably at sports practices, spending time at dinner, and perhaps even practicing their instruments. And let's not forget that they were probably also completing homework. So I'm not saying that all homework is negative, because I think we can have students doing meaningful learning at home. It doesn't have to be the worksheet that follows up a math assignment. But really what I realized was that my pressure to have students do well in state assessments was probably what was causing undue stress on students and their families. And I just became more understanding if something got left behind by a student, and became more cognizant of using time wisely in school. And my focus really shifted from how much students had to complete to how well I facilitated learning to deepen understanding. Rather than completing many math problems or doing an abundance of schoolwork, it was what were we doing to deepen learning? So throughout that time, I explored how we can authentically engage students and spark intrinsic motivation to learn.
Hey guys, we're going to step away from this episode for just a second for me to remind you that you have a story to share. Our Teach Better conference happening November 8th and 9th is all about teachers sharing the stories of their classroom, Head over to teachbetterconference.com, submit a proposal so that you can share your story with all of us this November. Let's get back to the episode.
Definitely. I think that's we hear that story from time to time of teachers who look back and they reflect on how they used to do things, and we've had guests say, "Oh, I'd be ashamed of how I used to do it, embarrassed, whatever." But I love that you didn't say that. You've looked back and you're saying, I look back and now that's what drives me to do it differently now, to do the things the way that I do now, and you're using that failure in your head as a learning opportunity to be better now and to do amazing things now. So I love it. That's awesome. Appreciate you sharing that. So let's flip it around now. Let's talk about a success that you've had. And this could be something big or small, but tell us what happened. Why was it a success for you? And then what'd you take away from that?
All right. Well, there are lots. I think as educators, we have failures and successes daily, right? Some are small and some are big. One of them I'm really excited to share with you is from my experience of working alongside teachers. On a side note that connects to the story I'm about to share, did you know that according to the National Education Association, more than 40% of teachers leave the profession? And so that statistic right there is one of the reasons why I'm so passionate about working with different schools and educators to provide support. We have a teacher shortage in our country, and we need to be drawing people in and helping to maintain them. So educators enter the field, and some schools provide mentors, but mentors are often teachers who have a stipend position and cannot lend the appropriate supports that are essential to ensuring that the new hire receives what they need to be successful. And not all schools have in-house instructional coaching or a model that promotes excellence within all educators in all stages of their career. An area in which I focus on is ensuring that educators are as successful as possible. So, in order to best support educators to reach their full potential, it's essential that I work to develop relationships that foster trust, especially in my coaching role. And once educators grasp that I'm not a threat or there to evaluate, we're able to have real conversations on how they can improve their craft and create the conditions to empower learning. So in this particular situation, I was working alongside teachers to infuse technology in meaningful ways to empower learning. Some of the teachers were uncomfortable with technology and didn't really want to use it, and others were accustomed to using technology, but primarily in a passive manner. A passive manner would be using technology for something that could be done using paper and pencil, basically as an electronic worksheet that may be slightly more engaging, but not stimulate deep thought, leading to higher level learning. Now, I do want to add a disclaimer, though, that technology does not have to be leveraged to empower learning. It's just one tool of many that we can use in our classroom. So anyhow, our goal was to empower and deepen learning. But before we even selected any technology, we first looked at the learning goals and learning targets and which strategies and protocols were best. Then we began to look at the tech tools that would enhance the learning. So when working with the teachers, we used reflective questioning within multiple sessions of professional learning around the topic of the 8 math practices. And our work together revolved around spending more time breaking apart complex problems, demonstrating thinking, creating models, and developing the ability to construct viable arguments and critiquing the reasoning of others. And that's what we're working on, understanding ourselves to be able to do this within the classroom with students. And so we spent more time working with kids along the way to say, hey, it's not about doing 15 math problems, but how do we take a couple problems or even one problem and really break it apart, especially if it's a complex math problem? How do we get them at all ages to be demonstrating their thinking and using those models? And the big one is those viable arguments and critiquing the reasoning of others. And so once we understood that learning process for students, that's when we looked at infusing technology. But the focus is always on pedagogy first. So what we did is we leveraged tools such as Book Creator and Explain Everything that are pretty similar, but kids, that way they had choice in what they wanted to use. But kids could capture their thought process on each of those. They could record their voice, they could break apart problems, and then what I love is that they could share it to either Seesaw or Flipgrid. And we use different platforms depending on what the school currently uses, because each school is a little bit different in what they allow or what they utilize. So once uploaded, students would listen to the reasoning of their peers, add on to their peers' thinking, and even provide constructive feedback using sentence stems. But again, that was a lot of work with collaborative conversation to front load that learning ahead of time. And what we saw was this. Students just took off in their learning. Kids weren't complaining, oh, it's time to do math. They grew more excited to learn math. And before you knew it, students were adding in more information, details, and background knowledge that we had more than we had expected. And it was truly exciting work. And as a result, learning just deepened and their thinking processes spread into other areas of learning. So to me, that is one of the most powerful examples that I like to share, because you can utilize it in so many areas of learning in the classroom.
Elisabeth, you have done such an amazing job in your answers, just focusing on such important pieces that we need, not only facilitated through a instructional coach, but also just that we can facilitate between, colleague to colleague or with our students. One of my favorite components has been your focus on reflection and purpose. The not just allowing teachers the time to reflect, but also the reflection on what each element, even those small, tiny elements, can do to enhance learning. I was just talking to a group of teachers earlier today on a webinar in Ohio who are just trying to better their practice. And, sometimes it's on huge concepts, but this one specifically, it was a group of teachers, 5th grade teachers, working on mastery learning. And we had such deep conversations on small classroom management strategies that when you can really have that deep dive for an educator, then they go back and they spread that wealth back to their students, and everyone's able to grow from it. I think it's so exciting to know that is a focus of what you've been able to do with teachers you've worked with, because I couldn't find it to be more important, truly.
Thanks, Ray. And thanks for sharing that example too. And I think that going along with what you're saying, when teachers can have the opportunity to step outside of their own bubble and get into classrooms of other teachers, that's where a lot of learning takes place, even as an instructional coach. So I'm in a coaching role where I'm supporting educators, but I'll tell you what, every time I walk into a different classroom, I'm learning something from the teachers there. Sometimes it's something that I'm like, oh, here's something we need to work on. But a lot of times, almost all the time, I'm like, wow, that's a really neat strategy. Or, oh, wow, look at these kids in this class. And it's so refreshing to be able to look into other classrooms that I wish more teachers had that opportunity on a daily or just even a more regular basis. Maybe not a daily opportunity necessarily, but more regularly.
Sure. I mean, Jeff, we talk about that all the time when we're able to work in districts and help them do implementations on, anything from mastery learning to, everything, community engagement, all the things.
Right.
Is that we're continuously learning and growing from our interactions with educators. I think that's very, very, very powerful. So I want to switch the question to you then, Elisabeth. What outside of that one realm of education, what is getting you excited about our field? What's going on that maybe is up and coming that you're just really stoked about?
Well, there's a couple things. So what has me really excited right now is working with schools to create the conditions to empower learning. And engagement, as we know, can be viewed at different levels. Kids can be engaged, but not always learning at a deep level. So my role is really working with educators to create experiences that increase engagement, that shifts learning to empowerment. And that means we're really looking at involving students in goal setting and as co-pilots of their learning. And to me, it's really exciting work when you see kids just take off with independence. But this all means that we have to begin with that foundation of culture and shining a light on every individual's potential, and then encouraging students to take ownership over their education. Ultimately, together, we work to reimagine learning by sparking curiosity and inspiring creativity and promoting student agency. But additionally, I recently am working with a student. Well, he's a master's student up at Binghamton University, but I'm working alongside him as an advisor, and he has virtual reality technology that he's been developing. And there's schools in our region who are going to be piloting that and utilizing that. And I'm really excited to see what this does to transform learning in the classroom, where students can interact in a different world with one another, solving problems and working through challenges together. So that's another area that I'm really excited to see what's going to happen.
So with that being said, Elisabeth, what is one piece of advice that you would want to give educators who are eager to continue with this progressive mindset where students are taking ownership and teachers are purposefully reflecting with colleagues and their friends on social media? What type of advice do those educators need to continue in the right direction?
It sounds cliche because I feel like everybody says it, but really putting relationships first and when we're looking at empowering learning, the kids have to have those relationships. They would be able to take the risks. And all too often, I notice that there's educators who notice that their classroom culture is crumbling, that there's different drama taking place, and you're not able to be as efficient in your teaching when the culture isn't very supportive. So really encouraging educators to take time to foster culture through team building, and then being intentional about debriefing, because it's really worth it. If your culture is sound and that foundation is strong, then anything else becomes possible.
I love the focus on the culture. We actually, Ray, I don't know if you remember in our episode that we released today with Chris McGraw, we talked so much about the culture. Chris is actually Ray's principal, and we talked about the culture at their school, and just Ray, I don't know if you remember on that, if you have the chance to listen, but I said you can just feel it's just radiating from the rooms even when there's no one in the hallway. So I love that you touch on that.
It's something I'm so proud of. If you didn't listen to episode 53 for our listeners, you go back and listen to that one, because I really enjoy working for Chris McGraw. He's done so much with our culture. It means a lot to me as a teacher working in that building, but also the impact it has on our students is incredible.
Yeah, and he touched on the same type of stuff, Elisabeth, that like with that culture that's allowed them to do other things, because that culture is such a crucial foundation. Like you were just saying, if you foster that and build that, so many other things become possible.
Yeah, and I appreciate that, first of all, that he's doing that too. But Jeff, something that you said, that when you walk through a school and the culture is outstanding, you can feel it. You can feel when you enter the building, you can feel it in the hallways and the classrooms. And when it's broken or there's something missing, that's noticeable too.
I was just going to say that when it's not there, you can notice it too, just as well. Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So before we get into, we're going to do our quick fire, like 6 questions in 15 seconds, but I want to ask you really quick, can you give us like the quick overview of your book? Your book's out fairly recently, yes? When did it release?
Yeah, it just came out in the beginning of January. So
that's what I thought it was just January, yes.
Mm-hmm.
And it's called Take the Leap, Ignite a Culture of Innovation. And can you give us sort of the who's it for? What should I expect when I dive in there?
Absolutely. I think there's a little bit of something for everybody in here. I hit on everything. LEAP, first of all, is an acronym that stands for Luminous Culture. So a luminous culture is one that shines a light on every individual. And then the E is empowered learning, to encourage students to take ownership over their education. The A is for authenticity and learning, where we can tap into passions to create relevant learning experiences. And I go into a little bit on maker mindset and how we can create the culture of maker education, and also project-based learning and passion projects. Not necessarily how to do all three, but the overlapping elements of those components. So, and then the P is potential soars, because ultimately my goal is to ignite a movement of inspired, confident learners. And so the book is really written to challenge conventional thinking and support educators to grow beyond traditional and self-imposed boundaries, and really look at how we can spark curiosity and promote student agency in the classroom.
Oh, I love it. It's a great book. We will, of course, have a link for you to go get that book right away. And you're also the co-author of Education Right Now, Volume 2, right?
Yes, top strategies for improving relationships and culture. And so in that, there were 9 of us who wrote for that book, and it was 48 hours. And within 48 hours, we had to decide as a team what our topic was going to be and what each chapter we were going to write on individually. And then we had 48 hours to write 6,000 words. So that was fun.
Yeah. Wow. No, thank you. That's tough. Ray, can you imagine that? That's not how we did ours at all.
No, absolutely not how we did ours. But it does sound like a fun challenge I'd be willing to take on.
Maybe the next one.
I do want to say, with Education Right Now, that all royalties for that book go toward the Will to Live Foundation to bring awareness and for prevention of teen suicide. So it all goes to a really good cause too.
That's awesome. Yes. And we, of course, have that linked as well. So, all right, let's have a little bit of fun. We're going to do the next 6 questions, and your goal is to answer each one in 15 seconds or less. You ready to go?
All right, let's do this.
What is one ed tech tool you cannot live without?
For educators, it's Twitter. Being connected increases your ability to share resources, seek and support, and gather new ideas.
Give us one book you're reading right now.
Drawn to Teach, an illustrated guide to transforming your teaching by Josh Stumpenhorse.
You mentioned Twitter. Who do we need to follow on Twitter today?
I don't know if you have time for this. I have a long list. I've got everybody from
Give
Tom
us the
Murray.
short version.
Okay. I've got Tom Murray, George Couros, Mandy Froelich, Katie Martin, all people that you want to follow about Future Ready Schools, innovation, and challenging mindsets. Awesome teaching ideas and strategies. Kristen Gaynor, Jennifer Gonzalez, leadership, everybody from Sean Gaylord, Tara Martin, Dave Burgess, Joe Sanfilippo. And I would say if you're looking for how to reach success with even the toughest kids, look out for Brian Mendler and his books that he has out. Social Emotional Learning Culture, Lavana Ross, Jimmy Casas, Jeff Zuhl, Hans Appel. EdTech, Rachel Dean Poth, and Early Childhood, Heidi Veal. Connecting with Families, Laura Gilchrist.
That was the short list.
Yes, it really is. I feel awful leaving people out.
It's tough. You can go on forever. We're going to start limiting it where they
forever.
have to pick one just to make it really hard. I do want to mention that a whole bunch of people on that list do have episodes on this podcast, so you can go search that. And
There
one
you
of them
go.
will be coming up. Actually, our next episode is with Joe, so
Awesome.
lots of good stuff there. All right, so let's get back on track. What's the best YouTube channel or blog for educators?
Ooh, I didn't know the blog was going to be an option. I'm going to go with TEDx to listen and learn from others and just challenge thinking and reflect on your own. I have a lot of favorite blogs. Jennifer Gonzalez's is one of my favorite, though.
Cult of Pedagogy, right?
Yes.
Yes, this is a great one. So, all right, so give us one daily, weekly, or monthly routine every teacher should get into.
Take time for yourself. Take time to exercise, whether it's a walk, run, and my personal favorite is high intensity metabolic alternated with strength training workouts.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's a mouthful. All right, and what is the best piece of advice you've ever received?
Take time to enjoy some white space, meaning take time to take care of yourself and your own health so that you can be the best version of yourself for others.
Awesome.
Love it.
Other than the 38-minute long list of Twitter users, I think she did pretty well there, right?
She did pretty good. Yeah, Elizabeth, I'd give you top 10 of all the podcasts. That's pretty good.
Well, yeah, I think I could have kept going with people, so.
We believe it. Well, Elizabeth, I might have the most important question for you tonight, and that has to do with how our listeners can connect with you. Obviously, all these details will be in the show notes, but we really would love to hear where our listeners can find you and keep this conversation going.
Well, I'm on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn. So typically my handle is at Elisabeth Bostwick. And then my website and blog is elisabethbostwick.com. But I'm very active on social media, so connect wherever you are to find me.
Awesome. And you can get all the resources and all the different links that we've talked about in this episode over at teachbetter.com. And the show notes, including all the links to connect with Elisabeth, and as well as to grab both of the books there and explore all those people that she mentioned on Twitter, so you can go follow them and learn and connect and everything there. So make sure you head over to teachbetter.com for all of that. And do me a favor, think of 5 people that you know right now who need to hear the awesome, amazing stories that are being shared on this podcast, just like Elisabeth today, and share this podcast with them. We really want to continue to share the stories with as many people as possible. Make sure you hit subscribe so you don't miss any upcoming episodes. If you can give us a rating and review, I'd truly appreciate that, and I think Ray would as well. So, Elisabeth, thank you so much for taking some time and hanging out with us and just sharing all your different stories and your experience and your insight and having some fun. We really, really appreciate it.
Thank you so much. It was wonderful.
And until next time, let's get out there. Let's teach better.